So, first of all, I mean, I'm just so pleased to see, first of all, people turning out tonight. Thank you for coming. I know it's a crazy time. Just the fact that we have an official crew gathering for the first time in person. Yeah. And I know you were talking about that. This is the first time that you're going to see some of your crew, which is amazing. Yeah. In a time of COVID. And to put a film together in COVID is, can we say it's challenging? Pat?
Yeah. No,
you want to talk about what you're doing and where you just came from?
Yeah. I mean, we're still editing. So the movie airs Monday night on CBS, and I wasn't here to introduce the film because I'm still in the edit room. And we probably will finish tomorrow, and if not, we'll finish Friday. So we're still working on the movie. And I would just say, and Matt can attest to this, and certainly Kane, it's just been very, very difficult to finish the film because we're not in the same room together. We shut our office down March 12th of 2020, and we haven't been together since. And for all of you, how many film students are here besides Liam? You know, the best part about making a movie is to be in a room together, or making a score, let's say, is to be in a room together with your musicians or your teammates, and we haven't done that in almost 2 years. And it's really hard, and it was hard on everybody, and it's stressful. So seven of our teammates got COVID in the last 8 weeks, and they were out. It just, everything was hard. So, and CBS moved their air date earlier at the last minute. So it was just like, wow, okay. But I don't know. If you have a really good team, you figure out a way to get through it.
So you need an iron bench, don't you?
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
This is basically what we call a wet print, folks. This is literally fresh off the baking sheet.
I mean, we're actually not done.
Totally done.
I'd rather not talk about it, but we're almost there.
This is the glorious, glamorous life of documentary filmmaking. Writ large here, but let's do a little quick background, just because we go way back. We go so far back that we were from an era where high 8 was the highest technology possible at the time. Yeah. We met in Chicago, actually. I was teaching a summer class at Northwestern, and I invited some local producers who were making a show called The 90s, which is an amazing thing if you want to see a great piece of history. Pat Creadon was a producer on the show and came along with the guy I invited. I had not met Pat before. And famously, we did our thing with the students, and then we spent, 3 hours in the parking lot talking about everything.
This guy's awesome.
Who is this guy?
Me.
Yeah.
We have lots in common.
It was just kind of a special moment in time, and we've been doing filmmaking of some kind or another on and off, and mostly on, for the last 30 years. You know, this is what happens. This is why I tell all my students, never, ever think that somebody you're in class with right now won't be like a life bond that you're going to be making films with literally until you're both in wheelchairs. It's a very, very special thing to find a like-minded person and then take that into real life. You moved out to LA. I was already here, but you moved out. We started having adventures, doing things. Somewhere along the line, we both got this crazy idea that maybe we should be making documentaries. And that one fateful group of people that came together, sketching out ideas on napkins in restaurants about how we're going to get this done. It's a film from 2006 called Wordplay, which Pat and the amazing Christine O'Malley, I don't know if Chris is here tonight, but
not, unfortunately.
Yeah, they just decided. You could tell how Wordplay came about.
Yeah,
and then
I mean, Wordplay is a documentary we made about the New York Times crossword puzzle. It was our first movie. We have a couple of Wordplay fans back here, a couple of Will Shortz fans back there, and I was editing corporate videos at the time, and shooting a little bit too. I was like a freelance cameraman. We had 2 young kids at home, and I was cutting this really lame video, and I was solving a crossword puzzle at the same time, because that was way more interesting than what I was cutting. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I just want to do stuff that I like. And we called up Will Shortz and left him a voicemail, and he called the next day and said, I'd love to do this. That sounds really fun. And a year later, we were at Sundance with our film. We sold the movie for $1 million. I actually said to our agent, maybe we should give some of that money back because that's so much money, we're never going to live up. We're not going to meet those expectations. You know, this will be like a bust or something. And he's like, Pat, $1 million isn't even a lot of money. I'm like, yes, it is. That's a lot of money. And we really never turned back. We've been making documentary films ever since. In fact, Christine's last film, she produced the Taylor Swift documentary for Netflix. I don't know how many of you have seen that. It's terrific. And that was the opening night film at Sundance in 2020. I think together, she and I have had 5 movies at Sundance. But it all started with that little film. And I always, like, whenever I meet film students, I always try to encourage them to, like, if you want to get a job and work in the industry, that's fine. The entertainment industry is huge. The entertainment and news industry is enormous. It's one of the biggest industries in our country, excuse me. And that's fine, you know. Get a job at Disney or get a job at Warner Brothers, or work on a show, or work on a movie, or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. That could be incredibly rewarding. But for some of us, you kind of want to do your own stuff, you know. And that's a very difficult bridge that's kind of a leap of faith, because no one's really going to hire you to direct your first movie or produce your first movie. You kind of have to do that by yourself. So anyways, we can talk more about that later or afterwards if you want, but it's what it is it's the combination of artistic pursuits and being entrepreneurial. And if you can put those two things together, it's amazing how many incredible musicians and filmmakers and artists put those two things together and figured that out. And, you know, Walt Disney, as complicated and somewhat controversial as he is, Walt Disney is actually an incredible example of an artist entrepreneur. And he really built something because he was an artist first, and then he was kind of a businessman second. And there's lots of people like that, but he just kind of comes to mind. Anyways, sorry if I'm rambling. I've been in the edit bay for like 19 months, and I have to get out of it because I think I'm going crazy.
From one dark room to another dark room, that's what we do here. So let's jump to what we just saw here, and safe to say that you are the product of an institution of higher learning that has some history with this institute of higher learning, not Loyola.
I'm gonna get my butt kicked in the parking lot. But I went to Notre Dame, and so I love college football. I love college sports. I love USC football, 364 days a year, and I just love sports, and I love college sports, and you know, there's just, I mean, just to kind of get to the characters of the people that are in the movie, I actually never knew this story, and I grew up in Chicago, and I'm a college sports fan. I never knew the story, I should say. I just had never heard of these guys. They were before my time and whatever. And you know, it's funny because the story, it's a fun sports story. And, like, the guys that you get to know, like, they pull it out in the end. And that's always really fun. And it's fun to see these men. They're all 80 now. I mean, they're 80. They've been around a long time. It's sad to say this, but 3 of them died while we were making the movie. Like, this is they're at the end of their lives, right? And they're kind of, like, reliving their glory days. But they're also talking about something that they really didn't talk about. They didn't talk about this, the discrimination. They never talked about it back in the day, ever. Because as it's said in the movie, as Nona Storr, the historian who's in our film, says, they wanted to be respectable young men, you know, and respectable young men don't demand things that they don't have, even though they deserve those things. And there were times when I was in the edit room at night, and maybe I was just tired. There were times when I would listen to Ron Miller talking about what it feels like to be discriminated against, that you're invisible and that you don't exist, that I would start crying. It was so sad to me, so sad that these guys who are heroes, I mean, they're heroes in Chicago, and a year later, Jerry Harkness can't even rent an apartment right near campus. So it's interesting to be here tonight because I have no idea how people are going to react to this movie. You know, we're tired. It's been a long time to get it done, and it's been very hard. And it's a fun movie, but it's also a very sad movie. It's kind of both things, you know, and it's not resolved. That's actually the one thing about the movie that you know, sometimes when you're making a film, and Doug, I know you've done this on so many films. Honestly, how many Academy Award or nominated movies now have you worked on? Like 4 Academy Award winners? Is that correct?
Blur together.
They blur together. Sometimes you really get
3, lost 2. So.
1, 3, lost 2. There you go. So 3 and 2.
Still about 500.
So, but when you're making a movie, and it takes a couple of years to make, sometimes you really get stuck. You like really get stuck. It's like, this isn't really good enough, or we're not, like, there's something we haven't figured out. And the thing that we finally came to accept about this movie is not going to have a happy ending. It's not, you're not going to tie up all the loose strings when the story is over. Because if we did that in the movie, this movie would feel like a lie. It would not, absolutely. And so you're always kind of like, typically when you're making a movie, you're almost trained to resolve everything. And that was just not what this is. And actually, that's actually why we called it. We used to refer to it as the Loyola Project until we would get a name for it. And then we realized that's the name of the movie. It's a project. It's not, the movie's not over. The story's not over. That actually ended up being, that was the temporary name, and then it just became the name. We decided that was probably the best name for the movie, and that's what we called it. So, I don't know. It's been, I'm so tired, and it's such a blur of the fog of making this, but I'm really curious to know, because I'd love to open it up to some folks here. If any of you have anything you want to say or talk about or any feedback, positive or negative or whatever, there's a couple of hands up. I'm just kind of curious what it was like to watch this, because I have no idea right now. There's a man in the back who's going to dive in head first.
Unlike you, I did know these guys from the basketball standpoint. I saw them live in one game. I actually listened to the entire Tennessee Tech game.
Wow.
It was incredible.
Did Red Rush call that game as
No,
well?
I was in Syracuse. For some reason, it was broadcast there.
Okay.
Of course, I saw the national game. I don't think enough emphasis was placed on the fact that Cincinnati really sat on the ball for the last 8 or 9 minutes. It seemed like they were hardly trying to shoot at all.
Yeah.
But I did learn an awful lot. I was glad to see that you, I don't want to say attacked, but gave the other side of George Island. I think that's to your benefit to show both sides of the picture. The only real nit that I would pick is that you repeatedly mentioned that Hunter was considered the top player on the team, whereas to my recollection, Harkness was a first-team All-American, and he was drafted. He played a little bit, as you did mention, but I always thought that Harkness was considered the star of the team.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a good point. I think that's something people can debate. Jerry was an All-American. Les Hunter went on to have the best pro career. So I think in that sense, people thought of him as being maybe the best player that played on the team. But thank you very much for your comments. By the way, Red Rush is the guy who's calling the game. And it's great because he's so objective when he calls it. Actually, I misspoke. He's not objective at all. He's such a homer. It's amazing. We win. What announcer says that? We won.
3 times.
We won.
Every time.
It's so great. It's so satisfying. Any other questions or comments or just observations? I'm just really, yes, please.
Hi. I don't want to get too emotional, but I am spouse to Greg Gray, one of the
Oh.
illustrators. So I got a chance to see him work on the film through the pandemic. An incredible story. But one of the things that struck me personally watching it, we lived in Pittsburgh for about 7 years, and during that time, I worked with a gentleman who was one of the first African Americans admitted to Duquesne University.
Mm.
And I remember we had been working on bringing back this African American Arts Festival to this historically black neighborhood in Pittsburgh. And in one of our sessions, we were like, Ruben, you should tell your story. That's an incredible accomplishment. And he got really emotional. He got really quiet. And he was like, I can't talk about that time. I don't like to talk about that time. That was a really difficult time for me. And so watching this and hearing how you were saying that they never talked about this and how isolating it felt, where other people look at it as this journey, this accomplishment, this thing to herald. Personally, to go through it, it's a whole different experience. And this film really brought me back to that moment and really made me understand deeper what he must have gone through. And so it was beautiful how it was put together and how it exposes what our grandparents have gone through and how it can inspire us to continue to move the project forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. There was an event that we had at Loyola University back in August when they welcomed back all the freshmen, and and Lucas and I showed the opening 3 minutes of the movie, and then we talked on stage afterwards and just sort of talking about the movie and that it's coming and it'll be done eventually, and Lucas said something that really struck me. He said he was very emotional when he was talking about this, but he said, thanks to these guys, all I have to do is just, go to class and play basketball. That's all I have to do. And I was like, well, that's not really true. Lucas and I are both from Chicago. We grew up 8 miles away from each other. He grew up in an all-black neighborhood on the near west side, and I grew up in an all-white neighborhood a little further west. And when I got my driver's permit, and that was it. When he got his driver's permit, his mom had to sit him down and give him the talk that you're a young black man in a car, and if you're driving, you should never make eye contact with the police, and you should never drive anywhere near a police car. And if there's one near you, you should safely pull over and stop your car. And to this day, Lucas has never looked a police officer in the eye, ever, unless he's on campus at Loyola, where everybody knows him. So, have things gotten better than they were in '63? Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah, in some ways they have, I suppose. Are we there yet? No. And that's just the part that's hard. That's a hard thing. I hope that people, I think this is a tough story, and I think it's a challenging story, but it's wrapped in a shiny candy wrapper of a March Madness movie. And we did that very deliberately. This is a fun sports movie, and it has a great payoff, but I like to think there's a lot more to it than that. And we'll see. We're just getting started. We'll see how the movie does as it rolls out around the country. As Doug mentioned, this is the first night, but the movie is playing I think it's booked now on 80 college campuses. It'll probably be well over 100 college campuses. A lot of the schools are really blowing out all the stops. At the University of Oklahoma, they're having a drive-in screening in their football stadium for the movie. So at the University of Utah, that school's actually had a very, very difficult year. They've had 2 of their African-American players were killed in separate incidences involving guns. And it's been a very, very difficult year for that community and for that team. So in Utah, they're having screenings in conjunction with the governor's office, and they're having them all over the state. They're having like a dozen screenings at campuses all around the state. So it's you always when you make a movie, you always want to figure out a way to get people to see it. And I think that this movie is it's timed well to basketball season, but it's kind of timed well to what we're dealing with right now. And so it'll be really interesting to see what people think as it rolls out.
I mean, I love the observation about sports films or any film that has, what you think of as the MacGuffin. There's the thing that attracts an audience because it's sort of the shiny core story of whatever it was that people remember from that history. Then you tell the bigger history. And I think the great thing about this film is it really isn't a film about basketball in the end at all. It's a great game, and it's a thrilling finale of a great basketball game. But every step of the way, and this is why I so admire this film, it brings it back to what it's really about, which is you're watching a country that is just waking up to the idea that this is how the future should be. And it's going to be a really hard path yet to come. So in the delivery of the message, it's easy enough to make a film where you simply lay down all the problems that we have, but if you can couch it in a story that gets people to see it, and then they say, this great story that I always thought was such a heroic thing, now I have to think about it in a different way. And just to see, the Iron Five talking about this and on the edge of tears, thinking about this time and then the time after, and that's really the brilliant thing, is how you contextualize it into the future, right up to the modern day. I love the fact that people will see this and wake up again to where we came from.
Well, we actually, Maura helped us organize the Zoom call between the 2 sets of teams. That went on for 2.5 hours. They loved it. The old guys loved. It was actually, it was like a therapy session, because the young guys all met the older guys when they made it to the Final Four, because that was a big deal. Like Loyola made it to the Final Four in 2018. I mean, that was incredible. They sold more Sister Jean bobblehead dolls than I think any other bobblehead dolls that they've ever sold. She became such a celebrity. So they had met, but they hadn't sat around and had a real talk about stuff. And we kind of moderated the conversation just a little bit, just to tee things up. And that's one of my favorite parts of the movie, is to see the younger guys, who they obviously really look up to the older guys, but in a weird way, the older guys really look up to the younger guys, because they're so much more willing to get involved in the conversations that are happening, and to be involved in social justice, and to be outspoken about what's going on. So it was like a mutual admiration thing between the 2 of them. So yeah, but it's really so sad to think that those guys waited really to the end of their lives to really talk about it, and George Floyd and everything that happened in 2020, there were more. The time had come for them to really open up their hearts and their experiences of what happened, and I think it was really cathartic for them. So, yeah, it's funny. Jerry Harkness really, really wanted to see the mail that the coach had gotten. He really wanted to see it, and the players, because they had never seen the mail, they thought that maybe the coach was making that up. That he never, I don't think he ever got any mail, maybe 1 or 2 letters. I've seen it. I've seen the mail. There's 300 or 400 pieces of mail. The mail is so threatening, as you see in the film, that the coach hired private security guards for his daughters, but he didn't do that for his for his players. And in a way, like, I don't necessarily blame the coach for doing what he did at the time. It's very troubling to me that the family won't share the mail with the players. They won't even give the mail that was addressed to the players to the players. I mean, that's illegal. That's a felony. It's called obstruction of correspondence. You can go to jail for a year for that. And they are hanging on to the mail. It's the craziest. So in a weird way, like, the mail has nothing to do with the story, but it kind of has everything to do with the story. It's like it's like you can point to that and think, like, that's why we're stuck. We're stuck in this thing with racial problems that can't get resolved because people are just hanging on to things from the past it doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I don't really know what to make of that. But I drove up there twice to Northern California to get the mail, and they pulled the Lucy with the football and pulled it away and said they didn't want to share it with us. So it's a very strange detail, but I actually think it's a very important detail in the story. Someone has a question in the back. Yes. Can you speak up just a little bit?
We're going to get you a microphone here in a second.
Yeah, and I can repeat your question. Yeah. No, so the question is, like, it seems like we could have taken them into court to get the mail and kind of hired lawyers and all that sort of stuff. I suppose we could have. In a way, I feel like that's not really my job. What I would kind of love is I would love for the university to reach out to the family and say, we'd really like that mail to be part of the university archives and put it out there for all to see. Because isn't it really troubling that the players themselves don't even think there was any mail? Like that's how history gets rewritten. Oh, there wasn't any mail. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. No, I've seen it. You're gonna go. If you come down to Mississippi to play us, you're gonna go home in a box. How would you feel if one of your kids was playing on that team and the coach was behaving that way, and now their family is basically behaving the same way? It's so troubling. It's bizarre to me. But that's what I would like. I would love it if the school reached out to them and they were able to conclude this and get it done. The family actually said to me at one point, if you ever make another movie about this, we will show it to you. Now is just not the time. It's just like, what? So, yeah, that was bizarre. Anyone have any other comments? Because we've been going way more than 15 minutes, so I don't want to keep it. What is it? Is it a Wednesday night? Okay, yes.
That's all good. I love the animation. I thought that.
Me too.
I thought it being still really set us in the moment. I love particularly the perspective that you gave of the Mississippi players. I thought that was, being able to hear their side and hear that they were kind of in it more than the game too, and that they got more out of it as well than outside of basketball. So I really appreciated that, and I really appreciated you telling this story. You know, as a young black man who's in his first year at a school chasing a goal so pretty much frivolous, you know, compared to what they had to go through. It gives me a more sense of gratitude and appreciation for the opportunity that I get because of those people who set the foundation for me. So I appreciate you telling that story and allowing me the sense of gratitude. I did want to ask,
yes.
As a former athlete and understanding the dynamics between a coach and a player after the game, was there a relationship between Coach Ireland after the guys played?
So was there a relationship between Coach Ireland and his teammates?
Yes, particularly the
It was very
African-American
strained.
ones, where
He did not have a good relationship with his players, according to his players. In fact, once they started getting back together for reunions, Vic Rouse used to say, Vic Rouse passed away in 1999. He died as a young man. But he used to say to Ron, you know, are you going to that thing back on campus? Yeah, I think I'm going to go in for it. Great. Is Coach going to be there? He is. I don't think I'm going to go. You know, being a coach is not an easy job. And coaches are very complicated, especially successful coaches. It's very complicated. I've met a lot of coaches, big-time coaches. And so I don't, you know, I guess that sort of comes with the territory. But I think what was really troubling for the players is that after Coach Ireland retired in the mid-'70s, he spent the rest of his life talking about this kind of white savior narrative, that because I did what I did, you know, I was able to open all these doors. And that's kind of true, but it kind of isn't. As Ron Miller says, he was a coach and he was trying to win, period. He didn't care at all about any of the racial tensions that were happening. And frankly, that wasn't his job. I actually don't blame him for that. He is what he is, you know, and he was a good coach. He was a good recruiter. I give him all the credit in the world for bringing that team together and coaching them to a national championship. It's really problematic to his players that he painted himself in a light that did not ring true to them at all. And so the one thing about making this movie that I think the biggest motivation that we had was that most people don't know about this team. But if they do know about this team, they know about the coach and they know about the team from Mississippi State who snuck out of the state to get to play the game. They don't really know about the guys who played on the team. They really don't. Like the guys on the team are like, they're like wallpaper in this story. The story's been told about other people in the story and not really about them. And when we started making it, we had a really simple goal: was what was it like to play on that team in 1963? Like, what was the dynamic between the players, and what was the dynamic between their coach, and what was the dynamics when they went on the road, and what was the dynamic when they came home? That was it. You know, when we did a 30 for 30 a few years ago for ESPN. It was about a famous Notre Dame Miami football game. It was called Catholics versus Convicts, a very famous college football game. And when we were making the movie, the executive producer of 30 for 30 called me to check in one day, and he's like, "How's the movie going?" I was like, "It's going okay, but there's a lot in here about this controversial T-shirt that says Catholics versus Convicts. Like, it's a lot about the shirt. I mean, the game is in here too, but it's like a lot about the shirt and the guys with the van and printing them and running away from the cops and where they're going to put all the cash, and it's like all this stuff." And he's like, "Pat," he gave me the best advice. "Pat, everybody knows who won that game. That's not what your movie's about. It's about all that stuff that nobody knows about." And that was exactly the right advice, That was exactly that. We applied that to this. We kind of know who's going to win the game. You don't really know how they got there. That's really what the story was about for us.
Sorry, I'm going to take this off while I ask a question.
Are you our friend from Northwestern Mutual?
I am. I'm one of the 4 that's here.
It's really nice to meet you guys. You guys are amazing. Thank you for your support. The Northwestern Mutual team is sponsoring the entire rollout of the film, and every single person we've worked with on that team has been amazing, and we wouldn't have been able to do this without you, so thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
More of a question / kind of just observation as I was just thinking about it. There's one thing that I thought about a lot was the time from after graduating to becoming 80-year-old men, of, you know, kind of giving them this closure, but like, what type of like mental health issues they could have faced. And I thought about my grandpa. My
interesting.
grandpa's a old black man from East Baltimore, was in Vietnam and went through all this different racial issues. And just hearing some of his stories and seeing him kind of like break down, I feel like as a man, he never even got some of those types of closures that he probably dealt with over, his, I think he's in his 80s as well. But so then I think of now, like mental health for men, right? You could say it in the black community, Latino, just men in general, how we're taught to hold in our things and who knows what type of, I guess, support or additional things that could have been done on top of all of the racial issues. And so I guess when I think about what's next, like how do we go, what's the next journey from here as a society or as, I think about like how do we help support these individuals who've bared these pains for so long and who are now like, how do we support them and how do we go about, I'm not saying I have an answer, but it's kind of just like an observation of where I envision kind of the next frontier of dealing with a lot of this mental health that's, I can imagine would start to happen, and even questions me, make sure that I'm taking care of my mental health because I'm, as a man, taught to hold those things in and, don't share these things or don't. And I spent a lot of time afraid of cops as well growing up. So it's just a lot of things, a lot of different things as I just see this. But yeah, I guess the overarching thing is, again, more of a comment, maybe not a question, but just what's the next journey for men or for this?
That's a good question. I think that I definitely think that there is real power in telling people's stories or sharing your own story and listening. And I really am grateful to the guys in the movie for just opening up to us. I mean, Maura, how great is Ron Miller? We spent the day with Ron Miller. He's just amazing. Like, we were there for like 3 or 4 hours, and you could listen to him talk. It's just great to share stories and in order to do that, you need two things. You need someone who wants to share their story, and you need someone who wants to listen to that story. And I do think that there's a lot of healing in that. And the one thing I've really come to really appreciate is that I think it's particularly hard for athletes to do this. It's hard for an athlete, a really good athlete, a champion, gets that way by dominating their opponents and winning and not showing any weaknesses and not showing any vulnerabilities. That's not how athletes are wired at all, male or female. It's about winning, it's about competing, it's about dominating, if you will. And so it's like the next time you hear an athlete step up to say something, it's so, if nothing else, this movie is a response to a pundit on a very popular cable news network who said about a black basketball player that he should just shut up and dribble. He should just shut up and dribble. This is kind of my answer to that. Is that athletes they're like our superheroes in our society, especially champion athletes. And when they have something to say about their experience, it would be silly not to listen to hear what they have to say, because they have a very, very unique perspective on what's going on in the world around them.
Yeah, I think as documentary filmmakers too, we're no stranger to sports stories. We've both been around some pretty amazing sports stories, but they're always, the sports are the lead. That's what gets you into theater. But they're always good sports documentaries are about something bigger always. Our good friend Mike Barnett made an absolutely outstanding film called Changing the Game, which is about, could not be more topical. It's a sports film, but it's really about transgender high school athletes fighting for their right place in society and to be able to compete as their true selves. And it's absolutely heartbreaking and beautiful and compelling, and you can't leave that film without realizing that now you have a friend who's a transgender athlete. You've seen this happen. on screen, and you can never quite think about it the same way again. And that's the transformative thing about sports stories is the natural drama. I mean, look at the drama in this game. But when you realize the echoes of what you've shown with the Iron Five and what they went through as a team, and you just make it personal, you can never unlearn that now. That history is there. And, this is always something a sports announcer on a basketball game would say, remember the great 63 team from Loyola? That's got a big, big parentheses around it because now you've got something really bigger to talk about. I think, our job is to redefine and open up history and say, you don't know the whole story yet. There's a lot more there. It's one of the great honors of being a doc filmmaker is you just find these stories.
Yeah. It's really, the thing that I think at the end of the day, really all you're trying to do is to make something that rings true. If you're doing nonfiction, you I guess if you're doing any kind of storytelling, you want something that just really feels like it rings true. And we showed the movie to Ron Miller, and Maura, you were on the call, right? Yeah. We showed it to Ron Miller, and he's just such a great guy. He and his wife Patty, they watched it. He said, I watched it twice, and then I watched it again the next day. And he said, it's perfect. That is what it was like to be 21 years old, playing on a basketball team in 1963. And in a way, that's kind of all that's all I need to hear. If it rings true to Ron, then we've done our job. And some people will like the movie and some people won't, and that's fine. And everyone has a right to their opinion. But to know that we were able to take their story and show it back to them 2 years later, and that it rung true, is it's really it's a relief, frankly. I'm relieved that he feels that way, and I'm really happy that he feels that way. Does anyone have any other
We had a
questions?
question right in the center.
Please.
Yeah, a couple of them. Yeah.
Hi. Love the movie. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just your opinion, or if we could expect a movie on the NFL coaching racism. I just seeing it in the news today, and would love to see that movie next. Would be
What
awesome.
was in the news? What exactly was in the news today? I didn't see it.
Someone might be able to say it better. I can't remember his name, but the Bills. Yeah. That's him. Yes.
Paid to tank the team. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so paid to tank the team, and he said, hey, that's not my integrity. I'm not going to do that. And I guess there's text messages between a couple different teams so he's suing the NFL right now. Word kind of just broke. I think it's today, right? This morning. Yeah, the text messages
Sounds juicy.
There's a Netflix 3-parter in about a week. Yeah.
I would love to do that movie, but I'm not finished
exactly.
with the one that I'm currently making.
You probably got
So
to
I have
finish this one first.
I don't want to
and
bite
then-
off more than I can chew.
Yeah, but it's some good stuff.
All right,
and it's all
This
over
goes to
his
show you
channel.
the best sports stories are not about the sport; they're
Yeah.
about the other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's so great about Wordplay was a sports movie ultimately, but it was about family and the things you can expose. I mean, all these great sports docs are about bigger things, and I think it's just a reflection. It's just like sports; we project our dreams on it, but our nightmares are there too, and it's really something. To look
maybe
at.
like talk about the Rooney Rule. So there's this rule in the NFL where you have to, when interviewing for a head coach or an opening, you have to at least interview a person of color, so you can check the box that you have interviewed a person of color, and then proceed to hire whoever.
Oh, the Rooney Rule?
It's called the Rooney Rule. Yeah, and so right, like if the best coach is white or black or whatever, that shouldn't matter. But in the NFL, that rule was installed to try to help break the disparity between black coaches and white coaches. But so still some work to do, right?
I also had noted the great comment you had about what about mental health, and look at where we are at in professional sports and mental health right now. There's so many great stories to talk about right now with athletes standing up for that exact issue. And like major world-class athletes are coming out to talk about that. What does that do to the conversation on mental health? It's amazing. Suddenly it's okay to talk about it because your sports hero is talking about it. Naomi and all the other amazing people who are stepping forward and talking about this stuff changes the world. I mean, these guys are able at age 80 to come back and maybe help change the world by finally really having a platform to talk about this. It's amazing.
Yeah, please. I think you.
I'm going to add one more thing to excite you. It's 70% of NFL players, if I'm remembering it correctly, I'm pretty sure I am, are black, and there are all white coaches. I think this was the Miami Dolphins coach. He was the one black coach. So just Tuesday morning. Now he isn't. Yeah.
Okay, totally different question.
Okay.
It seemed like you got everybody that you would have wanted there. Was there anybody that said no to you other than the family saying no about the letters?
Les Hunter's health was really bad and declining, I should say, when we started making the film. And so at the end of the day, one of our teammates, Adam Lawrence, went to Kansas. Is that right? Went to Kansas to do like an audio interview with Les, but and Les died not too long after, so we were not able to get that interview, and you know, again, he Les and Jerry Harkness and a guy named John Cernacrack all died while we were making the film. I'm just trying to think. Not really. I mean, we've always had a lot of luck getting the interviews that we want, and I think that just is in part because we got kind of lucky on our first movie. So Wordplay, we got President Clinton to be in that movie, who's a big crossword puzzle fanatic, and he called Bob Dole and asked Bob to be in it on our behalf, and then we got Bob Dole to be in the movie because they were involved in this famous puzzle on Election Day. And I think if you build up a good track record with your work, and people approach you if we approach people, they look you up real quickly. You can almost hear people like Googling you real quick to be, who's this idiot? Oh, I've heard of that movie. That's pretty good. So that helps. But we've been able to interview some really interesting people, and no one really comes to mind that we were not able to interview for this. I also, for what it's worth, I don't really like putting 1 million people in the movie. I feel like you want to tell like the best story you can with the fewest amount of people, because then when the movie's over, the audience kind of has gotten to know the characters. But if you have like 87 talking heads in the movie and everyone only has like one soundbite, and I've seen plenty of movies like that. Like, that's just not interesting to me. So that's just my own opinion. But okay, Barnauskas looks like he's ready for a nap. So Matt, no. Let me explain. Since I called you right before Christmas and said, Matt, we need a couple of motion graphics for our film. Kanae has all these amazing drawings that she and her team have put together, and we need those to be animated in some other pictures. I want you to think of a number of how many motion graphics you have made, even the ones that we didn't end up using, like the multiple versions of stuff. Think of a number, and I'm going to think of a number, and I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and you're going to say the number of graphics, because I have the number in my head. You ready? So this is from like the week before Christmas to now, which is 6 weeks. 3, 2, 1, 600. How many?
I said 400.
400. I think that's low. I think
ago.
that might be low. I don't know how you did it, but it's like when you watch the movie, like 70% of the movie just came out of Matt's laptop in the last 6 weeks. And all of the score came out of Alex's laptop. So between their two laptops, that's the movie. So anyways, all right, should we... I feel like we should maybe... First of all, I'd love to get a team photo. So if you worked on the movie, please come up, because I would love to get a photo. And again, a few of you I've actually never been able to shake your hand or give you an elbow bump, so I'd like to do that. So why don't we do that? And I just want to say thank you so much for coming out. The movie premieres on the CBS Sports Network Monday night. It's traveling around the country this spring. And Final Four weekend, it'll play on CBS, the main network, during Final Four weekend. So a lot of people are going to see this story, and we're so thrilled because we just love it, and we were honored to tell it, and it was really a pleasure to share it with you on night number 1 of this journey. So thank you. And Alex and USC, thank you for having a Notre Dame kid like me. And
get outta
Alex, who's
here.
another Domer, and Maura. And who am I forgetting from Notre Dame who's here? We quite a few Domers on my team. But thank you very much for having us tonight. It's a pleasure to be back.